There we go. Okay. So, welcome everybody. We have some folks who I knew were interested but unable to be here, including folks you may recognize like Jan Obert, Bonnie Andrus, Joan Wiseman, and maybe one or two more that I can't remember right now. Oh, Nancy Fosheim. Who are not back yet, but we're still interested in knowing what's going on, so I'm going to put this up.
Becky.
And Becky McMullen.
Yes.
Right, I had her there too. So that's a good number of folks that are interested and available for stuff. So we're at a point right now where we have a lot of options, and how we move forward is going to be somewhat based on the choices that we make at this point. So I'm going to be straightforward with you about the first thing, and that is Wynn Williams just told me today that her health situation is serious enough that she's not going to be able to come back this year to Ringers. She told me it would be okay to share with everybody that she's been diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, which is a hardening of the lungs, and is starting to make some lifestyle changes to prioritize different things at this point, and feels like this wouldn't be something she'd be able to commit to. She has our support and our prayers, and I completely understand her situation from that standpoint. So that leaves open not only a spot where somebody used to fill, but also that she was a leader in the group in that she performed the role of group representative. Some of you may not be as familiar with that, but last year we started a kind of a system of volunteers from within the major groups in the department to try to share the wealth a little bit as far as the organization goes, because it may not be as noticeable in this group because it's relatively small, but as the music department grows, it's harder and harder to keep track of the little details of every which way that everyone's going. And that's not necessarily like we want to keep tabs on you so that we know where you are at any given time. But if you're ill or you have an accident and can't make it or something, and no one knows, we don't know where you are, what's going on. We want to be able to remain compassionate. We want to try to continue to prioritize people and individuals rather than just a big department with a bunch of programs in it. And to do that, we have to remain vigilant about how we stay organized. So that's one of the reasons why I had asked for, in most cases, 2 representatives, kind of a main and then an assistant from each of the groups to help with things like attendance, overseeing the schedule, and just being an assistant to the director. I realized that when Peg was doing this, that she may have chosen to operate differently, and that was on her. But I'm going to make that available to whomever is overseeing I keep saying I want to say the department, but the bell choir this year, and let them know that that's a way that we've begun to put things in place. So if you're an individual who feels like you might be best suited for a position like that, please let me know so that we can make that aware to either me or whomever else is going to be overseeing this. So that said, let me tell you where we are with leadership right now. You may not know every little detail and thing that I do in the course of a week, but there's enough going on with the different styled services and how my involvement is that it's pretty difficult for me to consistently take on an additional ensemble. Apparently that became a commonplace years ago when they split it off. So when Peg decided to retire, it wasn't going to be that I just was able to take it on. As much as I would like to, I have to, stick with what I've got and continue to try to do the job that I have. And that meant that we needed to find somebody else. We took a good bit of time determining, and when I say we, it's not really just, the music department decided this is what we want to do. It had a lot more to do with, here's what I'd like, but it involves a lot of changes to the way things have been. So then I need to run that past people that have other ideas and other opinions that might be conflicting, either on the staff or on the council. And it became important to get that dialogue completely fleshed out before we could determine what this individual was going to be. So now that we have done that and we created a job description and posted it, we have some candidates who have expressed an interest in being considered for the assistant music director position. It's called that because there's an involvement with the choral program as well as the handbells. There is a data entry, organizational, administrative kind of element to, operating out of the office, keeping in touch with those volunteer groups that I just mentioned, and just overall helping remain organized during big Voices of Hope rehearsals. There's an element to it that involves being a competent performer, either to set a good example for others or to be able to step in or to be in one or more of the ensembles as kind of a ringer and assist people that are weaker. But then there is also the main component of being competent with leading an ensemble like this, specific to bells, but also specific to the educational component that comes into play anytime you have an ensemble with people from different backgrounds, different ability levels, different strengths and weaknesses, where you're trying to gauge all of that, put people in the right places, but also build folks up so that you can get the most out of them that we're trying to get. So in that, I feel like we have a really good potential, and his name is Bob Zahner. I won't go into all the details on the resume, but I brought it in case somebody had questions about where he comes from and what he does. Believe it or not, and it is a coincidence, he was a music director at one of the early churches that Pastor Mark was a pastor at shortly after seminary, one of the Methodist churches down the line in Lakeland, I think. I don't know where it was. He has been a school educator and just retired from that this past season. Within his duties as an educator in school, he was a choral director primarily, but he also ran classical guitar programs as well as handbells. So he actually did that both in school and in churches that he worked at. For a while, he had his own 4-octave set that he donated to the school that he retired from when he was finished. So he's got a good bit of experience doing this, specific to handbells and specific to education, but he's also a singer. And hey, he plays guitar too. So, from my standpoint, it just checks all the boxes. However, we have a process here, which I'm still learning about as I go because I've never hired anybody before and I didn't really know how to do this before I was tasked with doing it. So he's been given a verbal offer, and part of what's contingent upon him getting the gig is this audition today. So go easy on him. Don't be throwing paper airplanes and passing notes when he's not looking. No kick me notes on his back of his shirt or anything. But I want to observe him in front of a choir, and then it's just a matter of the crossing T's and dotting I's at that point. But the reason why we needed to push this up is because, quite frankly, Voices of Hope starts tomorrow, and then starting next week we have all the groups going. So we're at the beginning of the season, and I know what it's like to start after the season's already begun. It sucks. So if I can affect any way of getting him in here and comfortable before we really get rolling, I wanted to try to do that. So that means that I've had to do a good bit of extra work to push that forward and make sure that we could get to the point where we are now. I appreciate how many of you were willing to come out on short notice. Hopefully I was at least able to entice you with curiosity, so that was on purpose. And I also
realize that we're at the opposite end of the children's spectrum, right?
Yes and no. I kind of like to think from an educational standpoint that we go up a curve and at some point we start to come back down again. So there are elements to working with people that are universal. I fully expect that if you need to go potty that you'll just go. I mean, in the potty, not, You don't have to ask permission for things like that. But in all seriousness, Let's be frank. Small motor skills. A child's may be developing still and not at their peak yet. Some other people's might be declining due to arthritis. I mean, so there are things that someone with specific knowledge and understanding of education and working with a vast group of people at different age brackets could help identify and get to the point to where we can make consistent progress despite what might feel like this insurmountable wall to somebody who doesn't know how to get over it. Well, that's what an educator's job is try to help figure out a workaround. So we've got people in here with music degrees. We've got people in here who maybe don't read at all. We've got people who don't read very well but maybe think they do. I don't know. But we need to assess all of those different levels of ability. And we also need to break down some of what is not so much ability but a predilection. Meaning, I've always been here, I've always done it this way, this is the way I choose to do it, nobody can tell me otherwise, and if you don't like it, then I'm leaving. Well, I have to tell you that it's difficult to work in a team basis when we have a lot of lone wolves that want to do it their way and only their way. I don't know if that pertains to anybody here, but I know that it's easy when you get in a rut of having operated a certain way. It's easy to just want to maintain that because it's comfortable. It's difficult to acknowledge that some of those things about that rut could very well be the reason why we're not progressing further. So sometimes it takes an outside individual who's not attached to it all, who doesn't have a personal stake in it one way or another, except for just seeing the ensemble improve and loving everyone equally, to say, maybe you should try it this way instead. And then on the part of the individual to go, okay, I can keep an open mind long enough to give that a try. I don't have an agenda aside from wanting to see this ensemble successful. That is my agenda. Okay? And I'll just go so far as to say that you may have felt in the past, directly or indirectly, that there wasn't as much support for this ensemble as there may have seemed to be for others. And you would probably be justified in some of that. I'm not talking so much from myself, but I've had conversations with people who see things artistically in a black and white. They look for performance only as the measure of whether or not things were successful. You and I both know that if you go out and you play a level 1 piece and you do it really well, people are going to clap their hands and say, wow, that was amazing. If you do a level 7 piece and you do it mediocre, they're not going to go, oh, well, that one was a lot harder, so I can understand. They're just going to go, that wasn't that good. People can tell that, and they're harsh critics from that standpoint. So there needs to be an understanding on the part of the director, whoever's in charge, to go, this is where we are right now, but at the same time, how can we take baby steps towards getting to where we want to be tomorrow and the next day and the next day, okay? And to really try to create a pathway of success to get there. What was I going to say? Not knowing where we were coming into this year when we created the calendar, I basically sat down more or less with mom and dad at the beginning of the summer and said, let's do the calendar for next year. Who's going to sing when? What are we going to do? When's it all going to happen? So that we can lay all that out and determine what those weekends are going to look like for all the service expectations and all that kind of stuff. With some exceptions, sometimes the time frame for something changes or whatever. But the point is, basically, we know all the way through, the end of Pentecost, what groups are going to sing or play when. Now, we were very conservative with regards to handbells because we didn't know who was going to be leading it. We didn't know how long it was going to take for whoever was leading it to get the group to an acceptable performance level to where you would feel comfortable going in front of the congregation. So right now, I think the first date is like All Saints or something, which is the second weekend of November. If somebody comes in here, grabs a big old lasso and wrangles you all together and creates, a nice tight team out of this in a month and says, we're ready to go, I'll say, fine, let's put you on schedule and do more. Okay? But if that didn't happen, we'd be fine. Because I've heard little trickles of what it's like to feel like you have a goal set forth and you don't feel like you're prepared for it. So I don't want that to happen this year. So let's talk about what can contribute to that. And let's be frank about that. I have 80 people on my roster right now, roughly, for Voices of Hope. Now, I never see 80 people at a rehearsal. That's understandable. People go on cruises. People are sick. They're up north, whatever. Okay? So I might be lucky to get about 65, okay, when we're really in season. But with 4 sections of tenors, altos, sopranos, and basses, 65 people is still a decent balance. Okay? When you have a part for 10 people and 8 come, we don't know what to do about that. We have a problem. Okay? Because we don't have a system with a smaller ensemble like this that allows for the same mentality as a larger ensemble. So we have to work around that. All right? Am I going to make you pay dues and only allow you to be absent from 2 weeks or else I kick you out? No, that would be counterproductive. If you want to do that, there's plenty of other semi-professional, villages-based, non-church related ensembles you can do that with. So it's important to me to value you as volunteers and this as a ministry that extends specifically from the members of Hope Lutheran. Because I could get a bunch of young ringers in here too, right? Wouldn't you guys like that if I found a couple of 25-year-old good-looking hunk men that came in and could really swing those big bells well? Okay? But I'm not going to do that either because they don't go here. So what I want to do is figure out how we can get a solid, respectable ensemble as a direct representation of this congregation, but understand what that responsibility entails. So there's a couple ways we can go about it. Number one, we get more people. Yay! Like this. Okay? But still, we have people that need to come and go, which I understand. However, we have to be able to communicate well enough so that if you need to go or you decide to come, that we know when that's going to happen in advance. That's an important thing. Second of all, it might mean that the way we plan anthems fundamentally changes. So maybe we're picking a 6-part anthem for 10 people. And that way we can allow for 40% of those people to be away at any given time and still have a full piece. I don't know exactly what that looks like. Some of that is going to be up to you guys, because if we get a consistent inability to commit to the dates that are scheduled and we only have 2/3 of an ensemble or half an ensemble or whatever, then it essentially renders rehearsals null and void. They don't really do us much good because whoever can come on Wednesday isn't necessarily the people that are going to be here on Sunday. It doesn't help us out. Having alternates is a good idea, but you still need those alternates to rehearse with the group for that amount of time that we're going to expect to use them. Another option that's been discussed, if it were really to get to a point to where we keep a bell program, but we can't commit to a bell ensemble on a regular basis, would be thinking about duets or trios that use a lot fewer bells.
Your appointments here, so you're bringing it here?
No, just tell them that I'll come get him.
You'll come get
Yeah, I'll come get him. And on something that would use two or three people at most, to where you could almost be rehearsing with one another, and obviously it would require an accompanist. More like if I were to hire a singer or we'd have a trumpet soloist in here, then the handbells would take the place and do that instead. That's a way to still involve folks that can commit to being available for things like that, but not require as many people to be here, in order to have something be successful. So I'm throwing those ideas out there not because I have a specific plan at this point for how it's going to go. In reality, I'll tell you what I'd like. I want Bob to come in here. I want him to kill this audition and you guys just be so impressed. And then I want him to be hired, and then I want him to take on all those problems and deal with them on his own. because I don't have time to. I hopefully, if that all goes well, you all can be honest with him about your interests, about what days you'd prefer. I cannot guarantee you at this point that I know what day the rehearsal will be. And I completely understand that when we changed that, that it was going to count some folks out who had conflicts. And unfortunately, that's the hard part. Because if we did change it, say, back to Monday like it was 2 years ago, there may be some people that are used to coming Wednesday that couldn't come anymore too. So, that's one of those things that we'll just have to play that by ear. But I want you to know that I appreciate all of you, that I respect you all, and I hope that you understand that there's a give and take in that relationship. That means that when you commit to this, it's different than maybe committing to, some other volunteer ministry where you can come and go and it doesn't matter because it happens anyway. There are people that are let down if you playing a part and you don't show up, and then suddenly there's a gap between those people where those 2 or 3 notes are missing. So we need to work on how we can streamline that communication process, and then I will commit to you that whoever we put in front of this ensemble will help you improve to a point where you can be proud to put that in front of the congregation again. Okay? And I want to be sure that you understand that I am not saying anything about what I'm mentioning now to begrudge or bemoan or badmouth the way things were before. What we are encountering is flat out because this is a growing church. And when you get larger, you have to manage yourself differently. When we were a smaller church 10 years ago, my job would have been the only job here operating the entire music department. But that's impossible. It would take too much time, and I would need to clone myself to just be at the computer or on the phone and then planning stuff the whole time for all the things that we have going on here. So as we get larger, we have to figure out different ways to continue to manage ourselves effectively. So that's what we're talking about. Okay? So that's my spiel. If anybody has questions, feel free to ask them. Whenever the time comes that you're asked out, then I'm going to see if maybe somebody who knows what's going on can organize the folders, because I don't. And even if they're not in the right place as they were last year, as long as they get set up and people have gloves on, he's got a piece that he wants to run you down here that allows for, it says 8 parts, but we can split more and get 10, 11, 12, however many we have who want to play. If you're just here for information and you don't want to play, that's fine. If you can sit in if we need it but you don't care, that's fine too. But we definitely want to try to put the ensemble together so that we can get a sense for how that relationship is going to be. So does anybody have questions about anything I said today or anything I didn't say that... Yes, ma'am.
Will we have a schedule so that we know we're going to play the first of the month or the third Sunday of the month or whatever, so that we can plan to make sure that we are here?
Okay, so this is going to seem silly, but I'm going to repeat your question for this in case people couldn't hear that. She's just asking about the schedule, and so that people in the groups can plan in advance for when they're supposed to play and when they're not. The answer is yes. Right now, we have a tentative schedule in mind for the Spirit Ringers to be included throughout the liturgical year at different weekends, on 11:30 services primarily. Now, that may be evolving given whomever is overseeing this and how successfully they feel like you could go above and beyond that. But provided he has, or whomever is over this, I keep saying he, but whoever is directing, provided they have no problems with the schedule that I've set forth when I did the calendar, we can get that printed off and get that to you as soon as the season begins, so you'll know exactly when you're expected to play all the way through May. Okay? Anybody else? Come on now. I know if I were to turn my back, y'all would turn to each other and be like, what?
What's playing, so did the old ones go back to the those where they were playing before?
Good question. At this point in time, I don't know how Bob's going to operate that. I would say let's give him less to think about at first. So if you've got a spot you're used to and you've been here since last year, go to that spot first. If you're a person that doesn't know where to go, then let's wait until we see where those gaps are. if you have a spot that used 2 bells before and we've got too many people, you might end up on one and sharing the other bell with somebody else just for today. Okay? But it's really just so that we can attempt something to move forward with a system that'll give him a chance to see what you're like and listen to you, and then take it from there. I'm not committing to how it's going to be in the future by any means. Okay? That's true. And I didn't get them out because I wasn't sure, because the piece calls for bells. But I'll offer that to him, and if he says, sure, we can get the chimes out and then have y'all stand beside one another, we can do that too. Yeah, I know that you use them regularly for arrangements too.
So, we all have, say, all the bells are taken, and then we have subs, and they practice some, but the day that we're gonna play, what if that person didn't practice that part?
Well, that's the question is, we need enough of an advance so that whatever the ensemble is slated to look like on the Sunday that you're here needs to be that ensemble who's rehearsing a few weeks prior. Does that make sense? I mean, there's always going to be a case where somebody wakes up throwing up. Okay? I get that. And there may need to be one designated person who's like a swing. And, in a sense, from my mind, that would need to be somebody who's a better musician, who's a better reader, who's comfortable, not intimidated by the different sizes of bells, who basically is on hand. It's like a what do they call that person in the play who doesn't necessarily get the role, but the understudy. Yeah, that's who that person is. They have to be able to understudy any part and just be willing to swing for that particular week, no matter what happens. But see, these are the things that if it were me, I would have to figure that out, and it would be a first-time experience. I would apply understanding that I have from other ensembles and choral groups that I've led, and what I can recall from when I played with youth handbells back a long time ago. But I haven't seen that played out in practical. There may be some other system that I'm unaware of that he's employed because he's done this for so long that makes total sense. So that's why, if we get the right person in the position, then they'll have answers to your questions that way that I wouldn't even know. So, yes?
Let's say we play once a month.
So she says, let's say we play once a month.
Okay, just in case.
Mm-hmm.
That would be 4 practices before we perform.
Yes. Yeah.
If you know you're going to miss 2, should you back out and say, I'm not going to be here for enough of them to warrant, I think somebody else ought to play that part for that particular number?
Potentially, that could be a good consideration. As far as making that judgment right now, I haven't been in this ensemble to see that played out in real time over the past several years. Maybe you're all speaking from the standpoint of, well, that happened and that person should have bowed out. Well, okay. But I would leave the answer to that question up to whomever is directing, because they're going to have more of a heartfelt sense of what's necessary, what the minimum is. And some of that's going to be how they run their rehearsals. Because if you plan well, an hour and you got 2 songs to prep, you can get a lot done, okay? But, that's more than just start at the beginning and end at the end and then start over again. That's going to be isolating difficult sections. That's going to be having people really sometimes break things down fundamentally. Let's all count this, elementary school again. But those things are important because those fundamentals never go away, You're never going to do calculus if you can't add. And that's pretty much where we are here. So as much as that may feel at one sense like it could be demeaning, which is not what it's intended to be, those things are of the utmost importance before you can, you have the greatest technique, but you're putting your note in the wrong spot. Sorry, but it doesn't matter how good your technique is. The note came at the wrong time. So those things are important to address. So whomever is organizing the rehearsal should have the ultimate say as to how often someone needs to be here when they're going to play. That would be my feeling at this point. What are we doing on time anyway? Okay. Any other last minute questions? Should I turn the camera off and then ask for more questions? No? Bye, Bonnie, and whomever else is watching this.